undisputed king of stuff.
As king of stuff, I am very proud to welcome back fan favorite Carol Roth, who has a new book. Let me see if I can get it in the camera for you YouTube viewers. You Will Own Nothing is what it's called. And I think it's already going to be a bestseller because Carol Roth wrote it. And check out the YouTube to just luxuriate in the big hair that we have going on here. It's only, we're recording this on a Monday, but it's not a Big Hair Friday, but welcome, Carol.
Thank you. And John, you're representing as well. It may not be on your head, but on your face. I feel like you've got some really good big lace hair going on. So congratulations for being part of the Big Hair Small Government Committee.
Yeah, sounds good. Now, why don't you talk about your latest book? You've written them before, but this one just seems like a different feel. So if you could just give us a brief synopsis of what's going on, You Will Own Nothing, because it's almost been a meme on social media about eat the bugs. you're going to own nothing kind of a thing. So what's your idea behind this?
Yeah. So, when I first heard you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, like you said, it was sort of this meme going around the internet. And anytime you see something on Twitter or various other social media platforms, a lot of times if you see something like that, you figure it's probably taken out of context, or maybe they got it wrong. So I said, okay, I'm going to look into it, because the World Economic Forum is really a group of the business and political elite. So if they were advocating or predicting perhaps the end of private property, like that would probably be a little bit problematic. So it did not take me very much research to find the source of this video, the top 8 predictions for 2030 from the World Economic Forum, based on input from their global future councils. And the number one prediction was you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. And in doing a little bit more research, you find that came from another article that was around that topic, and some others that they had repurposed and repackaged as they like to do. And so somebody who has advocated for wealth creation, you're really a champion of every American participating in the American dream and having those wealth creation opportunities. I was really struck by this because I know, being a financial person, that ownership is a critical foundation of creating wealth. The way that you create wealth is that you own assets that retain their value or hopefully appreciate in value. And without that underlying ownership, you don't have that opportunity. So throughout history, anybody who has not had ownership, they've not been free, they've not been wealthy, and they've not been happy. So it really struck me to see the elite kind of saying these things, and then obviously trying to get you to buy into it. Like, it wasn't even just that they were predicting it, but they were trying to get the buy-in. You're going to be happy. This is going to be fantastic for you. What a convenient and easy life you had. And as I kind of looked at all these different forces and things that I wanted to talk about, it just came back to that over and over again. Like, whether it's ESG or CBDCs or the devaluation of our dollar, corporations competing with you to buy a house, whatever it is, it just kept coming back to you will own nothing. So it seemed like sort of the perfect umbrella place to start the discussion.
Yeah. And what's weird is they tend to view other lesser mortals as almost children. And they're like, look how great this is for you. You don't need to work. You don't need to think. You don't need to make decisions. We'll do everything for you. And that's just so antithetical to human nature, especially in America. You also call this, you warn of World War F coming. What do you mean by that?
So World War F is a financial world war where you are effed. And basically, as you see this you will own nothing prediction happen, there's another very conspiratorial thing that's going on, or at least it sounds conspiratorial, but it's not really, which is a new financial world order and a new world order. Wow, that sounds scary. Well, the reality is, from a financial position, we have been the center of the global financial universe here in the US for about 80 years. Our run's getting a little long in the tooth. Before us, it was Britain, and before Britain, it was the Dutch. And these things tend to change, on a period by period basis. And given some, very concrete data, including the fact that our public debt to GDP is 125%, and there's no real plans to have that shifted. unfunded, and the US's unfunded liabilities are projected at pretty close to $130 trillion. There's reason to believe that financial stakes are shifting. And we're seeing a lot of players say this. You've already seen Saudi Arabia and China on the world stage saying, oh, we're part of a multipolar world order. You've seen Joe Biden address this. He had a speech to the Business Roundtable, which are the CEOs of most of the publicly traded companies, biggest companies here in the United States. And March 21st, 2022, go look it up on the White House's website. He says this exact thing. The financial world order shifts every 3 to 4 generations. And then he goes on to say, there's going to be a new world order out there. We've got to lead it. And I'm assuming that the weave is the Business Roundtable people and the Joe Biden, probably not you and me, John. I haven't been invited. I know
Right.
maybe you have with your spectacular mustache. They went, wow, he's elite. So he's going to be part of that.
I'm building a robber baron look so I can fit in at my next trip to Davos.
I think you can definitely sneak in with that look. So let us know how that goes. But so you've got these financial stakes that are clearly shifting. You've got history rhyming, kind of repeating itself. All of these things happen. So the global elite who have money and power, they're seeing this happen. They follow history. They're not stupid. And so what are they going to do? Are they going to sit back and just kind of hope things work out for them? Or are they going to proactively try to control every resource they can and make sure that they're powerful? And so a lot of people ask me, like, is this intentional? I think it's deliberate. Like, I don't think they're intentionally, they want to kill your freedoms or take away your money as a starting point. I think that they want to hold on to their position. And if those are the things that have to go by the wayside in the process, then that's entirely fine. And so I think that's a different kind of nuanced perspective and lens that we have to look at this through. And that's the thesis here, is that the stakes are shifting. And so they're selling it to do the good of society. But as we know, and an anecdote in the book that, that when you're trying to serve man, that, sometimes to serve man is a cookbook.
Exactly. Classic Twilight Zone episode there. And a lot of people started looking at this too during the COVID lockdowns and things, because around the same time you had Klaus Schwab and World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. And what's weird is a lot of more conventional thinkers, let's call them, were like, oh, you people and your conspiracy theories about the globalists and the elite. And I'm like, no, it's on their website. They're bragging about this. Like you said, they're like, look what a great deal we have coming for you. Just lie back and relax. We will take care of you. And I'm like, no, it's not this big evil cabal. They're not hiding any of this. They're just like out and out saying this is great. And another thing they think is great is looking at China's social credit system. And we're seeing the inklings of that here. You, I'm sure, know far more about it, but just little things like, oh, I sell gun accessories for AR-15s. Oh, my bank just locked up my account. We saw it in Canada with Canadian truckers who are protesting. So what is the threat of social credit? Not only, what is it doing in China, but what's the threat of it coming over here to the States and to the West in general?
Yes, I'm really glad that I was able to sort of dive into this piece, because I do think it's important in context. Social credit, when you talk about it in China, is a much more formalized system. But as you gave some examples, here in North America, we're seeing it in a very informal way. And there's a very short step between cancel culture and then the state-run social credit system. So in China, it's not in a way as formalized as some people think. It's done sort of on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. Some places have letter grades, some have number grades, but the through line is whatever those people in charge think are important, those are the priorities that they throw in, and they can change that at their whim. And so some of the things you see in China are things like, if you donate blood, or you go to visit your parents, or you say nice things about the government, like that boosts your social credit score. And if you don't visit your parents and you cheat in video games and you take up too much room in the middle seat in an airplane, which, again, it should be punished, but maybe not by the state. And, you say bad things about the government, whatever, then those things mar you. And it really starts to restrict your access. So there's a story from NPR, again, probably not the most conspiratorial outlet, about a gentleman named Lao Duan, who was a coal intermediary in China. And he would buy, store and then resell physical coal. And when China sort of changed their approach to coal and said, oh, it's dirty, maybe we don't want to use it as much, he went bankrupt. But because of the state changing their actions, it's almost like COVID shutting down a business. But because he was, no longer financially trustworthy, he was put on the blacklist. And not only, was he not able to travel, but one day he's walking through town and he looks up to see a billboard and he sees his face on the billboard with his unique ID number and his name. And it says, this is not a trustworthy person. And as he's watching the different faces come up, it's, a bunch of guys from the coal industry that all had the same fate as he did, which is obviously highly Orwellian. And then, so, someone's going to go, oh, well, it's not going to happen here. But think about where this question started with, if you didn't take a vaccine, that you couldn't go to a restaurant, or, people were shaming you on social media and trying to get you fired from your job. In some cases, they actually did get you fired from your job. At the state level, we had the seizing of individual businesses for at least some period of time. We had the trucker convoy. And then just kind of outside of COVID, as you said, whether you say something bad or with guns or whatnot, that you get cut off from different infrastructure. So we're really a stone's throw away. The two kind of mechanisms that you need for the state to be able to do this is, one is technology, for the surveillance at scale and the storing of information, which obviously we have. The second part is that you need the social buy-in. And unfortunately, what COVID taught us is that there are a lot of people who think that they're morally right, not understanding the principles here, and that they're going to side with the states, and they're going to be the first people that to proactively turn you in when they think that you're not conforming with whatever they or the state thinks is quote unquote right think. And so the financial implications and the potential mechanisms to enforce that, keeping you out of infrastructure, making you a bad person, or even having something like a central bank digital currency where they can just cut off access directly at the Fed or government level. They don't even need to go through a bank, are staggering, and things that if you would have said this to me, John, like 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, okay, that seems really far-fetched.
Uh-huh.
But today, after what we've lived through, you have to see sort of the like we're just a couple steps away from this.
Yeah. And you're just seeing it creep in everywhere. And it's weird too, because every few months you'll see the media just tout what a great idea this is. Kind of like the whole eating bugs thing. It's just like every couple of months, it's like, hey, remember this article? And they've popped up about 3 dozen trial balloons and no one's buying it yet, but they are still trying.
What the big one that they're trying right now that I see over and over again is telling you how great renting the American dream is. A guy who I actually kind of like from a financial perspective was just like, hey, boomers, housing prices are high, and what a great time for you to sell and become a renter. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Why would you give this financial advice to anybody? This is horrible. But they keep trying to get on that theme of renting the American dream. And the staggering thing that I found during my research is before 2010, you didn't have any institutional capital in the single family home market. And because of Fed and government policy, as well as some of the decisions made after the Great Recession and financial crisis on a policy basis, starting in 2010, as other asset classes were so high and money was so cheap, these investors started competing with you to buy homes. And it's not like they're taking them and fixing them up and getting them to you in a nicer condition. They're literally want to rent you the American dream. And that is the single biggest source of wealth across demographics, across the country for households. So basically you're taking not only the literal symbol of the American dream, but the path to wealth creation, and they're trying to rent it back to you. And then they're making you buy in the you'll be happy part. Oh, it's so convenient, how carefree, you don't have to worry. Just call us, you don't have to call a plot, all these things. And it's staggering to see the media being complicit instead of taking the other side and looking critically and exploring these issues, which is why I think, the book is so important.
Yeah, and you get into this in your book. You'll see it every day with businesses, this whole software as a service model and exporting that out to the entire economy. So now, in the old days, I would go to my hipster CD store near college and buy the latest cool stuff. Now it's no, you got to subscribe and you pay $10 or whatever a month to Apple or Spotify or Amazon, and they will let you listen to their files, basically, is how it works. And I get like Microsoft Word, I get Adobe Photoshop. Well, I don't get the CD, I don't get the physical media. I rent the service from them. And I'm just waiting for the day I type some kind of wrong think into Microsoft Word, and all of a sudden, yeah, you're not really following our terms and conditions. You can't use our software anymore. So it is weird. Where are we seeing this in our environment? Because it's just popping up everywhere.
It is. And unfortunately, I'm somebody who tends to be small government. I know you are as well. But I think that in some cases, we have to really kind of shift our view towards, what is infrastructure and what is actual capitalism. When you have, 2 or 3 companies that are dominating the landscape, like that's not capitalism, when there's no room for anybody else to come into the market. If you think of something like your phone, like what is it that you own? You own like some glass and some microchips and plastic, but there are 2 companies that cover 99+% of all of the operating systems, not only here in the United States, but internationally. So if one probably talks to the other, didn't like what you posted, thinks you're bad, thinks you eat too many hamburgers, whatever their reason, they don't even need to give you a reason, they can shut off access. Not only does your $1,000 phone now all of a sudden become worthless, but it's your gateway to modern life, right? You can't access your email, you can't access your payment systems, your social media. What do you have? What do you own? You own nothing. And if you go back in history to the old telephone, that had a cord and a dial and things like that, and you'd call up and you go, "Hi, Mrs. Gabriel, is John there?" So why are you calling during dinner, Carol? Rude. So if any of you have ever experienced that before, you know what I'm talking about. But there was a law in place that because this was infrastructure, because there wasn't a competition, and these companies had such a privileged, non-free market position, that they were required to provide service to everyone, even if it wasn't, somebody lived in the rural wherever, and it wasn't economically feasible as part of, having this, duopoly or whatever position that they had. And it's not like, if we were having our conversation, we said something, it's not like somebody were like, "Well, I heard what you said and I didn't really like it," or, "Hey, John, I didn't like what you posted on Facebook," or, "Carol, you ate too many burgers, so we're just not going to let you guys talk anymore." So we really need to rethink our approach here. And it's a frightening proposition because, obviously the tech companies don't want to do this themselves. They love the fact that they don't have to do this. And then when you start letting the government in it, you do have the worry about regulatory capture from these guys. And you also have a bunch of morons. Like if you've ever heard any of the technology committee meetings, and you got like some, old fogies being like, I was on my jitterbug flip phone trying to access the internet. And you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to come up with something about AI and digital rights. So I almost feel like it's incumbent upon a group of us to put out a framework, and for us to push it out of what we'd like to see, and let it kind of, as Ron Coleman said, who's quoted in our book, and he's fantastic, we're going to get it wrong, but at least it gives us something to work from and mold, instead of just letting this run rampant. And again, total free markets here, but part of being a free market person is that you have to have a referee, and you have to have this competition. And when you don't, that's infrastructure. And that's one of the only roles of the government, right? Is to protect our rights, and including the infrastructure.
Yeah, well, you kind of touched on this earlier, but you think with all the kind of global financial business elites, like the huge conglomerates, those kind of business owners, maybe they want to be business renters. I don't know yet, but I think they realize that this whole post-World War II Bretton Woods system where, hey, US agrees we're going to protect the high seas, we're going to protect trade and commerce, we'll handle defense, just everybody use the almighty dollar. And that's why so many governments are freaking out about Bitcoin and all these things. And I don't understand a ton about currency and monetary policy and things, but they know that's fading away because that's just not how the world works anymore. And is this just kind of their deal? How can we remain on top even as the current system that made us wealthy kind of fades away?
Yeah, well, you have to remember that it's not that this is just fading away and the world's not working anymore. They're the ones that created the problem, right? So
Right.
when you have Fed policy, and I know it's not sort of core to what you do, but I try to explain this in the book to help people along with it. So when you have the global reserve currency, it's a benefit to the holder because basically the entire world is your currency. It means that sort of financing are cheap. So the biggest beneficiary of that's been the US government, who's been able to expand their using very cheap debt, thanks to the world. But part of the deal of that is that you have to keep the currency stable. And there's something called Triffin's dilemma, noted economist Robert Triffin, which basically said it's a challenge because you have the interest of the domestic economy and the interest of the global, financial community. And sometimes those compete and you have to make choices. So what the Fed has done, which is just amazing in concert with the government, is they managed to not support the dollar for either. Like it's not like they've thrown the international, scenario to the wayside because they've done, this great job keeping the dollar stable in our purchasing power here in the US. They've just completely destroyed it for everyone. And so this becomes a national security issue. If you're a country like China, you're a net importer of oil, you're a net importer of food. Those are priced in dollars. And so when your dollars that you have in reserve don't buy as much, then all of a sudden it costs you more to be able to feed your population and get them energy. So this is really a security issue. And then, this Biden administration freezing the reserve assets of Russia after their invasion of Ukraine. Imagine you're investing and keeping dollars by having US treasuries, and then the US is like, no, you can't have access. Well, you can't have this privilege as the world police if you can just make those decisions. So it's their own actions who have thrown this by the wayside. And I do think they're very desperate. I think that the debt levels and debt and power being at odds and giving them less options and the world being onto the things that they've done creates this scenario where, again, we're 80 years in, things are going to shift and we don't know duration. It could be 12 months from now, it could be 12 years from now, it could be 50 years from now. But we know that we're on that march. And so, yes, there is some level of panic for them to say, well, how do I make sure I get what's mine? And I think that, the sort of impetus is a little bit different depending on the different groups. But at the end of the day, in some cases, the objectives align. So sometimes they're working by themselves, sometimes they work together. In Tech's case, yes, there's a handful of companies that get paid rent for everything. And in some cases, it's, hey, we're losing money over here. We're worried about this position. How do we extract more fees? So basic greed, power, human desires, all at the base of this. But at the end of the day, because they do see it and not everybody else sees it, they're able to put out these narratives. And that's why it's important for people to understand the information, communicate it to other people, and for us to fight back against it.
Yeah, definitely. And what's weird too is just growing up, you're probably the same. I was just so used to having it beat into my head of all the boomer heroes in the 60s standing up to the man, and we don't trust, question authority bumper sticker on their VW bus, and don't trust anyone over 30. And they seem the most aggressive about, why aren't you following the latest memo that came out of the CDC, which contradicts the previous 3 memos released last week? And it's just jarring to me, being kind of the Gen Xer. It's like, wait a minute, why am I the radical rebel? And you guys are like, no, believe what the government tells you. A government agency said it. It has to be true. I'm like, okay, what happened? Every hero's journey story in the 60s and 70s was about standing up to the man. Now you're the man all of a sudden.
Yeah, I kind of feel like George Costanza in that Opposite Day episode that they had on Seinfeld, where he's like, I'm just going to do exactly the opposite. And I do feel like it is this opposite day, or this bizarro world where you have the people who fought, for free speech and artistic freedom being the ones who don't want that anymore, and this constant, kind of swapping of places. And then the other challenge that we have is not only, are the people who you think would be the allies actually being the useful idiots and being the ones who are
Mhm.
turning you into the state, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we also have people really distracted by a bunch of stupid stuff. Like, there are a whole host of things that we can deal with at any point in time. Like, if we lose the pole position in the global financial universe, like, that's not something we're like, oh, well, we'll just get the next Congress. Like, we'll just figure that out.
Right,
Like
right.
our lives, it's so hard, right? Because we have lived through this incredible, unusual, remarkable period of prosperity. And so we haven't known anything else. And it really is impossible for many people to imagine that it might be different. Even though they started to see some things shifting and changing, it's still on a relative basis, really
Mhm.
great. And I just have to kind of go back and go, okay, well, when we took over from Britain, I'm assuming that somebody in Britain during that time probably goes, oh, we're like the Imperial British, like, we're great. We're, how that's never going to change. But there is all of these catalysts that come in. You can start to see the rhyme happen. And while we don't know the exact catalyst, although the last couple of times that we've had a change in the global financial order, war has been the catalyst. So
Mhm.
God forbid, but
Yeah.
that could be something, certainly not outside of the realm of reality. It's just kind of hard for, I think, a lot of people to put themselves in that position. And also, financial literacy in this country is just piss poor. And I think that that's intentional. Obviously, we pay for the education, but it's been co-opted in a way that people are now believing that the state taking care of them is somehow a good outcome, and you're not looking to go seize that freedom and independence and American dream, or preserve it, not just for their heirs, but also for the world. Because the thing that scares me the most is that when we shifted from Britain being the center of the financial universe to the US, like, there was another bastion of, like, property rights protection and free ideals, like, ready to step into place, right? Like, we were like,
Mhm.
don't worry about it, we're great here. What's our option? Like, if somebody else is to, whether they take over in full or we move into blocks, like, these other, kind of strong powers are dictatorial and tyrannical, there's no place of, freedom and capitalism and, kind of an up and comer that we can go, well, it may not work out for us, but, look at these guys. Like, it's a huge step backwards for the world. And people come here from all over the globe to participate in that concept that the founding fathers, decided to protect. And I think it's really incumbent upon us to take that seriously.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I just people get so caught up, and I think, like you've said, this is intentional. Get so caught up in just oh, did you hear what such and such politician said? Oh, that was a total burn. And it's like,
Right.
we're talking kind of civilizational level things. When the whole Roman system collapsed, nobody there knew it was collapsing. It wasn't until after we can go, yeah, that emperor was the last guy. But it just kind of went down year by year, decade by decade. And before you know it, you're paying a lord so you can furrow his field or something like that.
Right.
And when you just look around, a great example today when we're recording this, King Charles and Joe Biden, ages 74 and 80, are being lectured about the environment by 79-year-old John Kerry. And you look at this photo op and you're like, this is like an old order that's already dead. And it's like, half the people don't know it yet. So what can people do to kind of prepare? It can be a scary time, but
Yeah.
any kind of I don't know, disturbance in the normal operating procedure is also the best opportunity to, hey, let's shift this way. So what are a couple ideas we can do instead of just fretting or tweeting about it, that we can be kind of prepared for this brave new world they're trying to foist on us?
Yes. All right. So Easter egg, just because I like you and Ricochet and your listeners. So normally when you think about chapter 11 in a financial context, it's about bankruptcy and losing your assets. But I decided to turn that on its head. So my chapter 11 is about owning everything. And it's about making behavioral and, certain financial behavioral shifts in order to try to fight back. No, we're not going to be able to stop a new financial world order from happening at some point, but we may be able to delay it, or at a minimum, we can at least set ourselves up and people in our community in order to face the chaos. Because I think that's probably the most likely short-term scenario, is that there's going to be a lot of chaos and things are going to be different than they've been in the past. And, when your house is burning down, it's not a really great time to come up with an escape plan. So being thoughtful about that now just seems to make a lot of sense, as, the Boy Scouts would probably agree. So one thing relates to financial planning. And I'm a big proponent when you see like the King Charles and the Joe Bidens and all these people advocating things, like, don't listen to what they say, but do what they do, right? Like whatever it is that they're doing. And you have the wealthy people who are doing financial planning. They're doing things like, talking to a planner about estate planner about trusts. And they're starting to gift money to their heirs now instead of just waiting for it to pass down. Things that, should there be a shift in, let's say, a wealth tax or an inheritance tax, because, by the way, one of the pieces of research is almost $85 trillion is set to turn over voluntarily via inheritances in the next 23 years. And the government really probably wants to get its hands on that, given their level of liabilities and debt. So when you say, hey, billionaires, yes, let's give them a wealth tax because they don't deserve it, they're going to probably be protected, but it's going to be your wealth they come after. So I want you to, and Andrew Egan, who I quote in the book, who is a wonderful estate attorney, gives some real specifics about what to do. But the overarching thing is to start doing that level of planning, to hope that you might be grandfathered in if they make those changes, just like the wealthy people are. Something that's a little bit more extreme is that if you are concerned about something like a central bank digital currency that may come out where that gives the Fed and the government complete control over every transaction, what other form factors can you use to barter and to trade and to get, food and medicine and the things that you need? It may be that you want to have some precious metals in smaller denominations in order to do that. It may be in your community, you divide it up and go, okay, this person is in charge of the chickens, I'm the doctor, I'm this, and you kind of create that plan that, hey, if we need to have a small ecosystem here to manage through some period of time, we're going to do that. And, some people may say that sounds like being a prepper, but where I'd say that, again, the nuance comes in here as a prepper, that's a lifestyle that they live in every single day. And, it sort of consumes everything that they do. From my standpoint, I just want to be prepared. I want to do these things so that I can walk through my life and not have to worry about this every day. And so I think it's just, again, a small nuance, but an important difference in perspective. So, no, you're not trying to do this and be fearful. You're actually doing this so you can walk through and not have to deal with it until that point in time comes. Because again, if the house is on fire, you don't want to panic in that moment and go, oh my God, I haven't even thought about this. At that point, it's going to be very late in the game to try and do anything.
Yeah, definitely. Well, everybody go buy, because you can own this.
Yes.
It's called
hard copy.
Yeah. You will own nothing, but it's out in hard copy as of the day we're releasing this. So thanks so much, Carol. Really appreciate you being on again. Where can people find your other work other than going out and buying a dozen copies of your latest book?
Yeah, so other than the physical hard copy, so they can get in the habit of owning things, I spend most of my time on Twitter at Carol J.S. Roth. You usually can't see my tweets because of how they've destroyed the algorithm, but I've been told that if you set up notifications, you will have a better chance of seeing my tweets. So I don't know. That's my best fight back against big tech right now.
Right. Well, fantastic. Keep up the great work, and everybody go out and buy this. It's going to be important for your planning over the next few years. I mentioned this maybe 6 months ago about Peter Zeihan's book about looking at geopolitics and broad trends and cultures. This is another one like that. Just so nothing in the next 5 years really shocks you, you're prepared for it. Thanks so much, Carol. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Thanks for all the support.
Ricochet. Join the conversation.